Today we're going to do a test, a very important test on drone dropping mechanisms. Now, as you may know, you get two types of dropping mechanisms. You get those that's purely electrical and that's released by a button that you press on your drone, like the Gannet X and the PGY-10. Now I'm going to do a review on all of these, but for this specific video we're going to test the tension release mechanisms. And there's one critical thing that's important with a tension release mechanism, and that is if you set it and it's at the same setting, then it must release at the same tension every time. And I've built a test setup and I'll show you just now, and we're going to test the different dropping mechanisms, tension release dropping mechanisms. Mechanisms like the Gannets, the Sky Rigger, some of the downriggers, and so on. So the video is on one specific aspect, and that's the repeatability. How repeatable are the drops depending on the weight that must be applied to those drops. So what I mean with that is, if you hook up your bait and your hook and something and so on your mechanism, and a certain amount of pressure must be applied for it to release. If I hook it again with the same setting, is that pressure the same or is it much different? So let's do those tests.
So we had only one little problem. We didn't have a scale like that, and the kitchen scale would not do. So in the hope that you will subscribe to this channel, we went through a lengthy process of designing a scale. First the mechanical part, and Hansi helped me with that, and later on also the the programming of the screen and the programming of the microcontroller, and after that we had something that we could use to do these tests. But let's have a look at the different mechanisms before we do the test.
And the first one is this one. It is the Canon 1 in the tests. You will see it's got rubber grippers here, and you've got a setting here where you can set the tension of those grippers. So the way that it works is you push your line in between those two rubbers like that, and it then pulls out there, and you can set the tension here. It worked quite nicely. Of course, you've got the problem of mounting it safely to your drone, like all the downriggers. So this was the Canon 1. The next one is the Canon 2. It's this one. It's got basically two settings. One setting here, it's got a cam mechanism there, and this mechanism can only turn half a turn or so, this cam, and it sets the tension. Then the second setting is, and you can see I push it in 1, 2, 3 times. So that's the second setting for the Canon 2 in the results, this one. The next one is also a downrigger. Also the problem of mounting it safely to your drone. It's basically a piece of plastic where the pins of this plastic is tensioned by this screw here. So if you fasten that screw, it will take these pieces of plastic, stick closer together, and it will grip the line. So this is the Sky Rigger. It's fastened to the drone with these two Allen keys here. It's mounted with this piece closest to the camera so that your mechanism doesn't swing into the camera. The mechanism works like this. It's released here, opened, and then you can put in your line, and then you close it there again, and the line then pulls out of there. It's got a tension knob here that you can set. What I found is that a very small change here make a big difference in the tension. So, but once you figured it out, there's not a problem with that. That's then the Sky Rigger. Next one is the Gannet Sport. Now the Gannet Sport's got a multi-turn mechanism, so you can set it very precisely. It's also got an indicator here that gives you indication of the tension. It's basically two ball bearings there. There's a spring mechanism in here that supplies the tension. Very easy to use and to set, the Gannet Sport. Next one is basically the same, but it's the Gannet Sport for the Mavic. Again, a window there that gives you indication of the tension, multi-turn setting that you've got, and then also the ball bearing and the spring mechanism. Gannet Sport for the Mavic. And our last one is the only electrical as well as mechanical mechanism. Of course, this part works exactly the same as the Sport, Gannet Sport, where the line pushes in there and it pulls out. It can only go in one way, into the mechanism and out of the mechanism. So very easy to set also, but this one's also got the electrical release where you can, with the light on off switch on your drone, you can release it electrically. This is then the Gannet X Sport. So this is the experimental setup. You will see I've got a bucket of water at the top. That water will flow down here. There's a valve that I can open into the bucket below that's hanged on the dropping mechanism. This bracket here is the same as the foot piece of your drone. It's coupled to a load cell that's coupled to that display that's measuring the weight that's applied to this dropping mechanism that's going to be hanged here. The scale will record the maximum reading, and it will also record all the readings that's taken, samples that's taken on an SD card, so that I can analyze that later on. For each dropping mechanism and for each line class and weight class, I will repeat it 10 times, and we will report on those results. So let me quickly show you one of the experiments. This is now, let's take that, the Gannet Sport. So I'll zero my scale. I will hang my bucket here. Just make sure it's empty. I'll hang it there. You'll see the bucket weighs about 180 grams. I will then start the experiment and I will open the valve. So water will flow now into the bucket. As water flows into the bucket, you will see that the weight, the maximum weight will pick up. That's the current reading. That's the maximum reading. And as soon as this bucket drops, the scale will record that maximum reading. So there we go. Let's see where it drops. And there it drops at 532 grams. What you see there is the last reading while it was released there. That was the maximum reading just before it dropped. So this I will repeat then 10 times for each weight class and line class, and we will report on that, on the repeatability of this these dropping mechanisms. So let me just comment on the accuracy of the scale. I've got 3 tested stainless steel weights here. This is 333.2 grams. This one is 201.7 grams, and this one is 144.6 grams. And we can start with the 144. You can see there, and then the 201.7. You can see there. And then the 333.2 grams, and you can see the weight. So here's the results for experiment number 1 that were done in the 300 gram range and with a 0.3 millimeter Kingfisher line. As you can see here, the dropping mechanisms is shown at the bottom. And let's take for instance the Canon 1 all 10 experiments or drops were done between these two ranges. The maximum recorded value were 363 and the minimum recorded value were 246. So it was exactly the same setting, and 10 experiments one right after the other were done. This were done exactly the same for each one of these dropping mechanisms. The winner here for test number 1 on the left hand side is the Gannet Sport for the Mavic, number 2 the Gannet Sport, and number 3 the Gannet Export, with the Canon 1 in the 4th place. And the one who've done the worst in this experiment were the Canon 2. So let's move to the next experiment. This experiment were done in the 400 gram range with a 0.3mm Kingfisher line. The winner here is the Gannet Sport for the Mavic, followed by the Gannet Sport, and in the 3rd place the Canon 1, in the 4th place the Gannet Export. The one that's done the worst here is the Dubru with a minimum of 243 grams and a maximum of 497 grams. Let's move to the next experiment that were done in the 800 gram range with a 0.55mm Kingfisher line. The winner the Gannet Sport, followed by the Gannet Sport for the Mavic, and in the 3rd place the Gannet Export, 4th place the Canon. Let's move to the next one. This is the last experiment that were done, test number 4 in the 1.2 kilogram range, and the winner were the Gannet Export, followed by the Gannet Sport for the Mavic, place number 3 the Gannet Sport, in place number 4 the Skyrigger, with a minimum recorded value between the 10 drops of 1.219 kilograms and a maximum of 1.404 kilograms, with exactly the same setting. So before we look at the final results, I'm also going to do reviews on, for instance, the Skyrigger and other downriggers. The PGY I'm also busy with. So, and another thing is I'm going to do lift tests for different drones, like for instance the new Gannet, the quadcopters, the Sharken, and so on. So if you want to see those, please subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to do these things, and I think you also get value from that. So let's have a look at the final results, and you will see that the Gannet Sport for the Mavic was the overall winner, followed by the Gannet Sport and the Gannet Export, all of them basically in the same range. The Canon 1 with 13% average deviation from the maximum away from the average, and then the Skyrigger with 17.3, and then the two that came last was the Dubru and the Canon, both around 22%.